What are some of the things that I'm sure you see patterns when people come to you and work with you?
Most often they're at their wits' end. They feel they've tried everything, but the problem just doesn't seem to go away.
I'm existing in the intersection moment of buying a small business.
They've gotten advice from loads of people, they're well-meaning, but the problem just doesn't seem to go away.
For the piece of the puzzle that I see, which is largely, it's a lot of buyers looking for sellers.
If you approach things, buyer or seller, it doesn't require people to be around the table to work things out.
How do you start successful negotiation strategy?
You want to empathize first before you bring into it what's important to you.
Welcome to DealMakers. I'm Sarah Sharp. I'm an attorney who helps people buy and sell businesses every day. And DealMakers is where we talk about the not so easy side of buying a business and the things that go into it. My guest today is Dana Garnett. She is a great person to speak to this issue that I think is one of the most overlooked things in the entire process of buying a business, which is the emotional aspect of it, the interpersonal aspect of it, the importance of building rapport, the significance, especially in something that's a small business, of making sure that the buyer and the seller have a good relationship that exists prior to closing, during the terrible, arduous transaction process, and afterwards, because the business transaction just isn't a success without it. Dana, thank you for coming on. I'm really excited to have you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm excited to be here too. I love the fact we got introduced by Anshul, who is, does his accounting services offshore and all, and he just really raved about you, and I'm so
Shout
glad
out
to
to
meet you.
Anshul. Thank you. Thank you. Put him in the show notes. Great for all of my clients who are looking to offshore, bookkeeping, tax prep stuff, and make sure you get those 7216 consents if you're doing it. So Dana, explain a little bit about your role in this ecosystem, because one of the things I found that was really cool when we were talking is I didn't even know that, what you do existed, and it's, obvious that there's a need for it.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I get that a lot, that I didn't know this was available or existed. I mean, what I am professionally is a mediator, and people know that mediation exists, right? And people benefit from mediation most often. The challenge with that over the last 10 years I've been mediating, I've witnessed time and time again that, and these are either divorce cases or business breakup cases, civil cases, that mediation gets you to settlement, but it doesn't ever get you to real resolution. You still walk away. There's something that didn't get resolved. It's, legally over, but maybe you're not over it. And so what happens, you take that issue into the next business relationship or marriage or what have you, and you wonder why the same thing happens again, why you have the same problems. So over the last, 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years now, I started working with individual business partners. I was working with a family business advisor, in fact. And he was on a second book tour and was referring his clients to me that would come to him for help with issues within the family business. And there are most often people that are like the one person saying, I'm the only one that gets it. That, I'm the only one that sees there's a problem. If we don't fix this, we're going to lose everything. And so I started really kind of coaching them in how to resolve the situation coming from a different perspective. In every case, the other people or person involved in the conflict wasn't even aware they went to get help. So this kind of became a thing, and I've started, graduated or gradually shifted from a lot of mediation work to what I call conflict strategy coaching work, for an interesting term. But yeah, it's something that whether you are, it was required that before you got into a business together, right? It's like marriage counseling kind of, but by the way, I'm on purpose not a therapist. I'm also on purpose not an attorney. Although people need legal advice, and I say don't dodge getting legal advice, because you need that perspective. People get so stuck and they make wrong decisions because they didn't have that clarity legally, or financially with their advisors. So anyway, I ended up developing a process that I take people through. And what I was going to say is, if people could learn and up-level their conflict resolution skills and their interpersonal dynamic skills from the get-go, not only would running the business and growing the business be a lot easier, but so would selling the business, or if you're looking to buy a business. Because at the end of the day, when humans interact, it's not about trying to avoid conflict. Conflict's inevitable. We have differences of opinions and agreements, strategic differences, how to run the organization, when it comes down to succession, planning, all that. There are going to be differences of opinion and disagreement. What we're trying to avoid, though, is unnecessary escalation of any kind of conflict that becomes costly, either legally or health-wise or time-wise or cost the deal.
Well, it
Because,
like that's best case
so that's, I don't know if that helps
scenario,
kind of put things
right?
into context. Yeah.
Totally. I'm existing in the intersection moment of a buyer buying a small business. And by small, I mean $5 million or less. And a lot of times, you said something about, working with family businesses. And when somebody is the founder of a business and they grow it and it's, sub $5 million, if that's the person who started the business or they bought it and they're growing it themselves, that's a family business. They might be 100% owner, but you better believe that their kids are cleaning the offices at night. Their spouse is pitching in on bookkeeping. Like, you have to diligence what role all of these other players that are not on the balance sheet, they don't have a salary sometimes, or conversely, sometimes it's like a college kid who has a salary for doing nothing. But like, what are the family members' roles here? There's a great podcast that Nathan Platter put together. It's the diary of he bought a business. It's like every day he bought a business and he updates for a year. And that was exactly the crux of one of the things that happened to his business in his podcast that he described. Was he bought some gyms and did the books. It was a turnaround, but it was not so narrow. But ultimately, one of the things that he was not able to see was the spouse was providing really complicated free bookkeeping services for the businesses. And to replace what they had been doing, Nathan had to spend a ton of money in bookkeeping. And that was he did a ton of diligence. He asked the right questions, but he didn't see that because it's this kind of hidden reality that there's a family business in every small business. In my clients, there's a ton of content out there. A lot of times my clients are dudes. They're guys, right? They get fed a ton of content and they'll spend all day reading, the like hostage negotiation and all of these, like, they're staring into the sun. They're doing the Huberman like ice baths or whatever, but they don't spend a darn second on interpersonal dynamics, which are something that like they could spend just the tiniest amount of time on and it would benefit every single aspect of their life. So I want more folks in this industry, and pretty much all of them, to focus on this. And then conversely, also lawyers. What makes a lawyer good is their ability to address that point. I mean, all day long, I'll have interpersonal conflicts where I go, well, here's one way you could totally screw the other person legally. There is the ability to do this. And you could say, come at me. Are you really going to sue me? That's an option on the spectrum of legal options. But, how does that overlap with, the interpersonal fallout? And
right.
You have
God, yeah.
with yourself and sleep at night.
Right.
So, what are some of the things that I'm sure you see patterns when people come to you and work with you of, kind of sticking frictiony points where they could benefit from better interpersonal dynamics?
Most often what I see is they're at their wits' end. They feel they've tried everything. Right. And nothing's worked. They feel they have tried to approach it assertively. They've tried to approach it calmly. They've gotten advice from loads of people they're well-meaning, but the problem just doesn't seem to go away. And that problem might be in a business setting again, have a client situation where a father passed away unexpectedly, and one of the two siblings was made president. The other sibling's spouse was really upset about this and ends up cutting off their children from the rest of the family. And when this particular situation was referred to me, this had been going on for 10 years. And this individual had tried lawsuits, had tried therapy, had tried pleading and begging, but to no avail. And so it was just within 1 to 2 months of helping them to, again, I talk about up-leveling our communication skills, but basically processing through what's at the heart of it, and which is not therapy. We're not going into past lives and childhood experiences. It's just basic, like, okay, what's the one thing that could be resolved?
Yeah.
Would make things better. And everybody always knows inevitably, oh, well, it would be this,
Oh,
And
really?
so,
Like, give me
yeah.
an example of how that would play out, anonymized, of course.
Oh, well, yeah, right. Well, I mean, if okay, what's the one thing that this could be resolved would make things better? Well, if my brother, would allow us to see the kids,
Oh,
right? Okay, over these
like,
10
I thought
years.
we were
Yeah.
talking about a business thing. Yeah.
Yeah, right, well, yeah, because meanwhile, that person, the brother set up very niche business, set up crosstown competition on purpose just to go at them, right?
Yeah.
So it's just whatever we can do to try to retaliate, you know, for a decision that a parent made about the business.
Yeah.
They're no longer here, anyway, but that would be like, I just want to see the rest of our family. And so we get down to the heart of that quickly. Where did that start? And then from there, impart, teach, train in communication dialogue. Like you can really literally construct a conversation where you approach the other person differently. I always like to do this. It's like when people are hitting up against each other and one person learns a new way, there's nothing else for this other person to hit up against, right? So it tends to neutralize the situation. Once you get that neutralized situation, it leaves it open now for new possibility, new responses. You break what I call that cycle of insanity, where you want a different result, but it's just spinning and spinning and spinning. Well, until you change your communication, your perspective, your approach, nothing's going to change. And when you said ice baths earlier and dudes wanting to, learn all this other stuff and take care of themselves, one of the things I've done with, when I'm speaking to business audiences now for years, it's one thing to say, you got to change your communication, change your perspective, change your attitude. And guys, yeah, right, I'm not going to do that. Forget it. And the more people have money to kill each other in court, they're going to do it, right? So, but what's, the motivator I have found, which helped me because I went through my own life experience that brought me to this, that's another story. But ultimately, if we're spinning in conflict, whatever it is, we're eating away at our health.
Right.
And we literally are hurrying our aging
Yes.
because the cortisol stays up. We think we get into these arguments and fights and then we get resolved. We think it's over. It's not really over because if you don't really clear it, it's spinning under the radar
Yeah.
and aging you fast.
Yeah.
And when people tend to hear that, they're like, "Oh, okay, you want to go take an ice bath for your health? How about try a new approach?"
Yeah.
But people, I don't expect them to just, do something different and believe me.
Well,
It's got to be about them.
right.
It's got to be important to them. Clearing this conflict is going to help you live longer, period.
For the piece of the puzzle that I see, which is largely, prior, like it's a lot of buyers looking for sellers. I try, as one of the fewer, it's a male dominated space. As a woman, I try not to talk about like dating analogies because I just like don't want to really bring that part into it and make everything, I guess, a little bit too like feminized, which is a little silly. But it is very similar to dating. So you're not my client. I can say it here. Like you're dating people. Buyers are meeting with sellers and seeing if they like what they have going on and if they want to continue kind of this relationship and through closing. But one way that it's a little bit different, usually, assuming that the seller is not going to keep working with you, if it's a full buyout, it's not like a dating to marry situation. You really just need somebody that you can kind of make it through a little bit of time in a high stress environment with, and then go on your merry way. So a lot of my clientele probably consumed a lot of like pickup artist content at some point, and like use those things. That is exactly the level. You don't have to be like a good 50-year marriage here. You just have to be able to like get the person to like you enough to put up with you for a brief period of time and then think generally fondly of you in retrospect. Like that's not the highest level of interpersonal engagement, but it is something like that involves a lot of trust. And that's the biggest thing that kills my deals. I had a call yesterday with somebody who had done a ton to really take off on a deal and ultimately found something in the QOE, the quality of earnings report, that indicated a pretty substantial discrepancy, but it wasn't the way that that impacted the financials. It was, and they had the words to use it, we had discussed it at length. It was the loss of trust. And,
Mhm.
it was the loss of trust that could, because he could have changed the purchase price to account for the different financials, of course, but he just couldn't get comfortable with the fact that the seller misled them or materially omitted something. And that is absolutely something you should walk away from if you can't trust the other side.
Right, right. And I will say the minute that person heard or sensed or felt like, that the deal wasn't going to be fair or they were changing the numbers and all, in that moment they get triggered by that. And that's when the trust is lost. If you approach things, buyer or seller, and again, I love to stress that it doesn't require people to be around the table to work things out. I most often work with an individual. And
Right.
as long as they know how to communicate from the start,
Yeah.
you're going to gain that trust so much faster
Yeah.
and so much more effectively. And you're going to understand when they say something that ordinarily may have irritated you or put you off in the deal,
Yeah.
you're going to respond differently
Yeah.
because you're going to realize that going about it differently is actually self-preservation for yourself, not just your health, but in this case, the deal as well. And it's so simple. We're not taught this stuff in school. We're not taught this stuff in MBA programs, but it's neuroscience based. It's all about how we're neurologically wired to respond to each other. And there's nothing out there that I've come across that, I mean, because I had to learn this myself, again, from my own experience with it. But at the end of the day, if you want to gain trust with somebody and you want to maintain that, even if it's a short-term arrangement where you're only with each other for a short time, like I love the dating analogy, how much better would you be off, right? And why not be better off in that communication side of it?
Yes.
Maybe if you communicated differently, a change in the price or however you chose to communicate it
Absolutely. Yeah.
could make all the difference. They may actually accept it.
Yeah. No,
You know what
that's
I mean?
true.
It doesn't have to throw everything off the rails, So that but again, unless you understand how to go about it, you put a lot at risk.
Well, and just even isolating it as a task. People know, put a letter of intent and start really digging into the business. And I always slow my clients down and say the first part of the diligence process is getting them to like you.
Yeah.
Like it just
Oh
do,
yeah.
build rapport, get to know them. They're having surgery in a couple weeks, put it on your calendar, follow up, be a good, chill person that they feel like they get where you fit in their world. They ideally, right, if you're a buyer, the seller sees a little bit of their younger self in yourself, or something like that, or you remind them of somebody that you care about. I mean, it sounds manipulative, but it's silly not to just pass it by. Like intentionally build rapport and then keep your ears open for anything that indicates that the person might lie, because if they're dishonest, there's no amount of like questions you can ask during the diligence process that will reveal that, because they could lie to you. So
Right.
that's a
Yeah.
very simple thing that people just skirt right past and go, show me the P&Ls for the last 10 years. And like, like,
Say, whoa, 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 hang on a second.
yeah, like it's not,
I don't really know you.
yeah, exactly. And people, perceive, understandably, human nature perceives rapid fire lines of questioning as criticism. I know this because I'm a lawyer and I get that feedback from the members of my family. So I'm like, but you didn't answer the question, mom. Like, So, like, you've got to understand that that will feel critical, and you've got
Yeah.
to offset that by, spacing things out or being aware of when the person seems uncomfortable. There's a lot going on in that process.
Oh,
What are some
absolutely.
of the things that people, because I deal with a lot of family businesses. Like I said, I think kind of all businesses are family businesses at the Main Street level.
Oh yeah, if they've been together long enough, they act like a family, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
they might as well be a family. Yeah.
So what are the problems? Like you have this family, right? If like I have a deal right now where everybody's been working there for like 15 years or more, right? And they're in office. That's a family. It's a weird, very knit ecosystem of 7 employees or something. And then you have a totally random new person coming in. So how does a person kind of get comfortable with those dynamics and know how to navigate it without just completely stepping in it? Not related.
So, and I asked, but I mean, It matters, but it has nuances to it. But basically, what I discovered some years ago, and this was actually working with a client, it was a family business situation, but I just kind of drew out on this piece of paper this, this like, look, this is an overlay of the relationship and the business and the family and all of that. And I've had actually people I've worked with who have gone into a family business and they're trying to work out the dynamics of the family and just not step on the minefields and, and all that stuff. But basically, it's when you are able to assess and follow up with communication that nurtures or just stays in a place of curiosity and wants to know more. And like you said earlier about building that trust up front, when you understand how to approach that, and again, it's not that complicated. It's just understanding what to say when, because this is very important to know that what we say specifically and at what point we say it in conversations makes all the difference. There's a very specific way to say something and a very specific order in which to place it to get the best outcome.
How do you know?
How do I know that? Or how do you know it?
The time to say something is.
Yeah, well, this is, it's based, well, I'll give you a quick example. If you or I have an issue, right? And I say to you, look, Sarah, what you just said really upset me, and I'm really thinking about calling this whole thing off. Okay. And then how are you most likely to respond?
Oh gosh. Oh my goodness. I can see how that upset you. I'm doing gentle parenting with my kids.
Oh, okay.
I can see how that really upset you. Let me think about that. Like, here are some ways we could maybe avoid it on the future. Is it because I said it by email? I had to apologize not too long ago because I said I really angered the other side. I said something that was glib, which is a downside of me. But it's true, which I say all the time, which is every seller thinks every buyer is an idiot. And it's true, right? If you thought your business should be run differently, you'd be doing it differently. So when somebody else comes in, you've been doing it for decades and they're like, oh, I'm going to outsource labor to India. They're like, okay, they all think it's dumb. And so I put that in writing. That email got forwarded to the
fun. Okay.
And the seller was very angry. And I, I can't call a representative, but I called the counsel and said I'd be glad to apologize. I was being glib. This is a thing I say for these reasons to normalize the feelings that people I think are going through and to make sure that they feel comfortable that is a common outcome and it doesn't mean anything unique to their circumstance, But yeah, it was a real throw yourself on the mercy of the recipient type of moment for me.
See, you're one of those rare people that have an idea of how to respond and how to write something, if you will, when maybe some offense has been taken or whatever, but you also describe what typically happens, whoever received that message from you, they're like, whoa, hang on a second. People tend to get on the defensive. Right. And they come at it like, what do you mean, what I just did, upset you? Well, what you just did, but what you've been doing the last 6 months, I'm tired of this, we're done, right? Instead of that, it's like, let's say, again, going back to if you guys have we have this issue, it's like, hey, Sarah, look, what you did yesterday, I just want to ask you, were you feeling, I don't know, anxious or concerned or worried about something? And because you need progress in this deal and you're not seeing it, I'm just wondering, was that where that was coming from? And I just give you a moment to respond. Would that be fair? I don't know. Is that it?
Yeah.
Now you see how it's like with me, instead of me going, what you did yesterday really upset me. Instead it's like, I'm just wondering, was that coming from XYZ?
So curiosity, it's like this absolutely opposite of your knee-jerk reaction in a moment, which is like, oh, protect yourself and fight back, but instead the more vulnerable, tell me more about what you're thinking. Why do you
exactly
is it true? Sometimes I know I should do that, but I kind of can't help but be like, when you say that, it makes me think maybe, or you think I'm lying to you. Do you think I'm lying to you? There
you go. Exactly. Yeah.
I
mean, the human reaction is to go, what are you kidding? What are you saying? But what's cool about that is most usually get one of three responses. Either, yeah, that's what it was, or no, that's not what it was. What it was is, and now you have new information to work with, right? Or kind of, sort of. Yeah, but it was also this. Okay. Well, thank you so much for letting me know that, because at the same time, I've been feeling a little unsettled about the direction this has been going in. And I mean, I think we both share a desire to have this deal go through and get this resolved. But I'm just wondering, is there a way we can work through this? Or, do we need to get some more, another opinion, or whatever the circumstances, right? Like, but what can we go forward together to sort this out?
That
You
is
know,
so disarming. Yeah.
isn't it? I know, I know. And what you said a second ago is so common, is that we get defensive. It's our protectionism, right? But being vulnerable, or just being curious, and really I mean really caring about the other person, the other party, the buyer, the other seller, whatever, without judgment.
Yes.
And this is key: without assumption or judgment, not what they should be thinking or needing, right? But what you're really guessing what's going on with them.
Yep.
And that in itself, that's what I talk about. It's self-preservation,
Yeah.
right? No judgment, really caring about what the other side is feeling, or what they're needing, or where it's coming from. That's gold, because you are going to get a whole different response, and you're going to learn more information, and you are going to gain that trust.
That's that makes I'm
Period.
actually being made fun of, understandably, and I really enjoy people making fun of me. So like I was getting a real kick out of it. But I was being made fun of recently by some clients because I used the term practicing radical empathy, and they were all like, what are you talking about? And I said, no, listen, that's the first step in any negotiation, because I did feel like I had to tie it to something that wasn't too emotional, right? And so, but it is true, right? All of the things
Oh yeah,
we're talking about are absolutely interwoven with successful negotiation strategy. So,
totally.
but how do you start successful negotiation strategy? You have to radically empathize, like really get your mind in the role and position, like in a 360 way of what the other person is experiencing as much as possible. So you know how to actually try, or you can at least make an educated guess about what
Right.
they're thinking. And in this instance, they were making fun of me because I was talking about practicing radical empathy for the bank. But I was,
Oh,
think about it. The bank doesn't, they're not going to invest in the new Facebook
right.
and get the upswing of that. Like their best case scenario is they get paid back the money that they lent with like interest. They don't have the upside swing of a just generic startup investor who might get taken to the moon. So of course they're going to be fixated on like protecting the downside, and they don't really care that much about your plans to grow it. They just want to know you're going to be able to pay them back, because that's the best thing that can happen for them. But they were like, we don't need to empathize with the bank.
No, that is so true. No, I'm so glad you brought that up, because every party to the deal, that human reaction is there. And if you are not empathizing, and there's something I love what you said, radical empathizing, right? There's, what I was demonstrating a second ago, there's a name for it, if you will: empathy before honesty.
Okay, all
Okay,
right,
you
yeah,
want to empathize first before you bring into it what's important to you.
exactly. Yeah.
Because if you don't, that's when you get the defensive. If I say, I'm worried about what's happening here, and I'm not so sure about what you said or what you're doing now, it's like, well, what do you mean, right? As opposed to, I'm wondering, when you did that, was it because of this? And what's so great about this as well, this approach, is it's subliminally offering appreciation and respect. It's showing consideration, and consideration goes a long way. And that's that whole trust building thing, right? When we empathize first in conversation, then it's going to make the whole situation go a whole lot more easily. And I've done mediation coaching where, before someone goes into mediation, like a business breakup, and they're so worried about the other party, their to be ex-partner in business, and I'm like, let's talk about the attorneys that are going to be there too. Why? Are you Because the attorneys are there to support their client, and they're going to say things that are meant to antagonize.
Yeah,
It's just, and not always, but sometimes that happens, right?
yeah,
And so be prepared for any comments or things that are flying across the table, and I coach them in that, and so again, it's going back to having this skill set to understand, how to approach it. And speaking of coaching, I heard a great analogy yesterday. Someone said, in sports, if we're going to talk about the dudes, right? In sports, like if it's baseball, you pick up a bat, you hit the ball, and you run.
Yeah.
Simple, right? And if it were that simple, though, everybody would be major league players, right? So it's like you to understand how to do this is one thing, but to put it into practice so you don't, it's like installing a new habit.
Yeah.
You have to habitually undo some things and redo some things so that you start getting better responses from people, or getting responses that are going to get the best outcome possible.
That,
With the least amount of stress and the least amount of cortisol. So you live longer and you're happier after your sale.
and you don't have to do the ice bath. Like you
No,
use
you're right.
ice bath, guys. It's
You
so
can if you want to, but it's not going to, you don't have to do it, right?
It's so much easier to do it this way. I completely agree. I love this as a tip of, you're feeling a moment of, intrapersonal like tension, and even just stopping and saying, how can I address this? Starting with, I wonder, the words I wonder.
Oh, yeah.
Wonder,
The best words are, I wonder, I imagine, I'm guessing, I sense,
yeah,
not, I know exactly how you're feeling right now.
right.
You're probably, yeah, you're feeling this, like, no, I'm not. Don't tell me how. It's like, don't go there. It's always guessing, guesswork, guesswork, guesswork.
And there's, I've consumed all the negotiation strategy stuff because I do this all day long every day, and I'm training my kids to do it. You should see us at the playground yesterday.
Good for you.
So
Good for you and your kids. Yay.
We landed on 2 special snacks, and then, well, actually it was 2.5. So I did split the difference. Sorry, Chris Boss. But I love this stuff. I love negotiation strategy. But at the same time, there's a level of adopting it that is disrespectful to your counterparty. And that's, where people are just trying to con each other into agreeing to something that they wouldn't agree to otherwise. And that, seeing hundreds of deals happen never gets the best terms. Like the best terms come. I had a deal yesterday where the rapport is so strong between the parties. There was a concern so this is a common thing, right? There's a kind of key employee, and the key employee is going off to do something else. And so the buyer is going, well, I can't reassure myself that they're not going to steal all the clients. So I'm paying for something, seller, but you have this key employee who's going to go set up their own business. So what happens if they steal the clients? I don't have any contractual nexus with that person, so I can't get them under a non-compete. So what do I do? And the seller was like, oh, I totally hear where you're coming from. How about if they steal any of the clients, I'll just pay you back all the money you lost from them. You're like, that's great. That'd be great. Thank you. That's nice. That'll solve it. And like that type of term comes from this mutual respect and this building of empathy where people are just being transparent about their actual worries, and the other party is empathetic to it. So that works so much better than any of the like anchoring and, nonsense like tricks.
People see through the tricks. They see through them, right? And if you've built a rapport from the beginning, then you can weather anything. Because you did a great one of these podcasts of yours that are fabulous with a gentleman recently that he was saying, he'd sold his business recently, and he's like, let's face it, it's horrible. It's a horrible experience. Do you remember that one? I'm trying to remember his name. It's like there's nothing easy about this. Don't, oh yeah, I'm going to just go and, or just the opposite. I'm going to go buy a company, or, buy an accounting firm. It's not going to be great. It's horrible. He says, no, it's not. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And so by establishing a rapport, and also this not just about conflict with other people or dealing with other people, but within yourself.
Yeah.
Being able to work through issues within yourself around whatever's going on in the spur of the moment, that gives you so much more clarity. You're going to make far better decisions about what you're dealing with. And doesn't make, to his point, it's horrible, the whole process, of selling or buying a firm. But yes, it's going to be difficult. It doesn't make it any easier. However, it doesn't have to be more painful. It doesn't have to be more costly.
Right.
It doesn't have to be as stressful, and it doesn't have to have as many, hurdles that come up.
Yeah.
Because you planted the seeds from the beginning. And last thing I'll say is, whether it's the buyer or the seller, let's say, the other person is just antagonistic.
Yeah.
But you still see that there's a deal here,
Yeah.
that's worth going through. They don't have to, they're not even aware that you have gotten some coaching or some help on how to show up,
Right.
and the more challenging the situation,
Yes.
just, the easier it can be. I mean, you'd be surprised at how effective just knowing, again, what to say when, in what order, at what timing, that it changes everything. And that person has this sense of respect from you, that they're and consideration. Now they're more open to hearing your ideas, and that's the icebreaker. Those things happen, but you're gonna have issues that come up during a deal. But yeah, and again, it could be the other person is just hard to deal with.
It
but
always
you
is.
but it doesn't require bringing them it doesn't require them coming in for a touchy-feely session. No,
Right. Yeah.
they
There's
never even have to
rules,
know.
like they don't, it's, yeah, completely behind the scenes. I love that about it
Yeah,
too, because that is the way
yeah,
negotiation strategy is, right? No,
yeah.
nobody's ever suggesting that you get your counterparty in a negotiation to read the same book with you and then you put
Right.
it on each other. Like that's insane.
No, 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 no.
It gets very much more like pre-dispute, like conflict resolution in advance
Yep,
component of
yep.
negotiation strategy that it seems like would help you at home,
Oh,
with your, with your
oh yeah.
family and
Yep.
your friends and everybody else. So like,
Yeah, yeah.
really
I
what
had a client.
you're focusing on. So,
Yep, I had a client recently left their family business, CPA firm, in fact, was having issues, conflict resolution issues or conflict issues with family members in the firm. Through showing up differently and working things out, this person, was my client, was able to, maybe this is what he wanted. He wasn't sure what he wanted in the beginning, but he was able to exit the business without any issue. Nobody threatening to sue each other, or accusing each other of anything. Go into the direction he was more happy with. Meanwhile, he's going through a divorce, but in the process of the business dealings that he was learning, working with me, right, he was able to actually come at his divorce differently.
oh, that's nice. Yeah.
And all that resentment and anger that we hold on to, that I was holding on for so long, that I finally, I mean, it was how I became a mediator. I learned how to get through this stuff really quickly, going through the neuroscience study of it. So, and that's when I started doing this with other people. It's like, oh my God, I didn't realize how quickly you can really resolve conflict, even years long, complex generational conflict, you know. But it had this knock-on effect for his divorce situation, and which just made his life so much more. It's a kind of transformative experience in that regard. Because imagine how many people that have gotten divorced, for example, or a business breakup. It
Right.
happened years ago, but they talk about it like it was still yesterday,
Oh yeah.
and it's still there. And that's the concern I have. That it's like, for our health, it's just eating away at us.
That's a
And
point. Yeah.
you know,
There's no limit. I mean, this is the
no,
thing to focus on. Like learning how to do your own quality of earnings report gets you one thing. This gets you everything. So,
it does, because all those relationships that you now have in your life, right,
yeah.
don't have to be. I mean, you think about it, when people break up in whatever way, shape, or form, the next wedding, funeral, graduation, everyone's like, "Ugh,"
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that way.
That's so
You
true.
know, life can go on. You can post deal,
Yeah.
post breakup, whatever, the
Yeah.
post sale,
Yeah.
everything can be fine. So,
I love this. Thank you so much, Dana, for coming on. Where can people find you?
at my website, mindfulstrategy.com. And yeah, I do have a program I run called Resolving Family and Business Conflict. I work one-on-one as well, but I find that when people have gone through the program, they get to the heart of whatever the issues are right away, and then they immediately start developing these communications, the styles, if you will, or the perspectives you get, and then that overlay, if it's a family business, especially how to show up. This is my client discovered, like when I did this for her years ago. She's like, oh my God. She actually put the diagram I drew on her bathroom mirror. And she's, I look at it every morning. I know how to show up in the family. I know how to show up in the family business. This is fantastic.
Oh,
But that kind of, those kinds of things. And so, yeah, mindfulstrategy.com. And Sarah, this has been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking with you today. It's been
thanks
so
for
much
coming
fun.
on. And this is another episode of DealMakers. So if you found this content valuable, check out our courses at dealacademy.org and like and subscribe and engage in the comments. Send it to your family members.